This is video 6. It will be the last video for CISC 133 Switching and Wireless Case Study. And in this video we will be doing the housekeeping and hardening of the devices. Now let's begin with trying to understand what exactly is housekeeping and hardening. So if we go back to our case study directions, it said that we wanted to put port security on all necessary switch ports, encrypt passwords on all devices, log out all devices after 3 minutes, and put a message of the day. So these are all security features. This is a way of making it just a little bit harder for somebody who doesn't belong on our network from getting on our network. So that's what device hardening is. Housekeeping is creating host names, logging synchronously, and the no IP domain. So what these commands do, just make it a little easier for us when we're on the command line interface. So with host names, we'll know exactly which devices we're configuring. Logging synchronously, I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes when you're in the middle of typing a command and the router were to interrupt you, it's kind of hard to understand where exactly you are. With logging synchronously, it will retype everything that was before the message popped up. So it's a lot easier to go from that point. The no IP domain lookup, if you've ever mistyped a command and the router all of a sudden, or the switch will all of a sudden try to find out what exactly you mean by that. So what originally thinks is that you've typed in a domain and it's going to try to access the domain. So with no IP domain lookup, it stops doing that and just takes us back to a prompt. So these are just ways of making things easier for us when we configure them. Now, what I strongly suggest you do is write down these command scripts here, because when you get to be when you actually take the case study, you're going to be pressed for time. So what you're going to want to do is just write these commands down in your case study journal. So when you go to take the case study hands-on, all you have to do is just type these into a batch file or a script like this, and then cut and paste them into the routers and switches. So here's the switch script. Enable config T. Here's our no IP domain lookup. Here's our message of the day. Here's our enable secret class password. Here's our username. So if somebody tries to Telnet in, the username will be Joe and the password will be below. The service password encryption command will take below, the password below, and encrypt it. So if someone does a show run, you won't actually see the password, it'll be encrypted. Linecon 0, login local. That tells the router or switch, and in this case a switch, to go look for the username and password locally on this device. Here's our logging synchronously. Here's our executive timeout command, which tells the switch to log out after 3 minutes of being idle. So the 3 stands for minutes and the 0 is for seconds. We do the same thing with line VTY, which is Telnet. We then put in port security. So this range command will put port security on all 24 FA0 ports. Notice though that I'm not putting any port security on the gigabit ports. Those are going to be trunked and they do not need port security. So the last thing we want to do on a trunk port is to configure port security. Then the last thing we're going to do is shut down any unused ports, and we haven't used 3 through 24, so those will be shut down. And the last thing we'll do is we'll allow the user a chance to put in the host name. So that'll be the last thing that this script will do. Let's go over to the router, and it does the same thing. Config T, no domain lookup, here's our banner, yada yada yada, and there's no port security here. Alright, so let's try it. Let's begin with our router. So this, I believe, is router 3. So I am going to copy the config, and we'll do a paste. And hey, what do you know? It looks like everything was in there, and we'll say R3. Alright, that worked out pretty well. Let's try router 2. Paste R2. Paste R1. Alright, that was easy. Now we'll go to the switch batch file. And we'll try paste. And this is switch 1. Now we'll try switch 2. Now the problem with switch 2 here is that we need to shut down that gigabit port that's not being used. So we use gigabit 1, 2, but we did not use gigabit 1, 1. So in switch 1, we used both gigabit ports to trunk. With switch 2, we only have one trunk. So I need to go into interface 1.1 and shut it down. Because the script didn't do that for me. Alright, and one last switch to go. Switch 3. Okay, so the last thing we want to do now is test to make sure that things still work. So once you put port security on and lock down all the interfaces, sometimes we can shut ourselves out. So let's test Telnet. So one of the things we did was we configured Telnet. So let's try and Telnet to let's try to Telnet to one of the switches that has the LAN configuration. So let's try to Telnet to switch 30.100. Okay, I think our username was Joe and our password is below. Notice that our message of the day popped out, and our enable password is class. If I do a show run, notice that my passwords are all encrypted because of the password service encryption command. So it looks like Telnet works. Let me just try to console onto a device and see what happens now. Okay, so now it gives me my message of the day and challenges me for a password, Joe, and my password is below, and my enable secret was class. Okay, so it looks like hardening has worked, and looks like message of the day is working, and the service password encryption is working. So the only thing I really have left to do now would be to test port security, and the only way I could test that would be to hook up another device and shut my switch down. So I don't really want to do that, but what I can do is do the password show port security, and that tells me that all the ports have port security on them, and of course we have no violations or anything like that. So that is it. Once you get to this point on the hands-on, you can go get your instructor and he will give you 100%, right? Okay, well, good luck on the lab here, and good luck on your hands-on final.